Hey everyone, it's Denise Brown. Thanks so much for being here today. I am the founder of the Caregiving Years Training Academy. I started helping and supporting family caregivers in 1990. I started a small business to support them at the end of 1994. And for just about 24 years, I managed an online caregiving community, which I sold last year to focus on training and development opportunities for family caregivers and former family caregivers. I also help my parents. I started helping my parents in 2004 after my dad's bladder cancer diagnosis. Okay, so let's talk about healing from discouragement fatigue. And I really had an insight about 4 years ago around compassion fatigue. This idea that compassion fatigue really is an umbrella term, and that we have to get specific about what it is that's wearing us out. So as I started thinking about what wears us out during caregiving, I became really focused in on, well, what are the strategies that can help us heal? If we're tired of trying, for instance, how can we feel better? We've been doing a series of webinars every month focusing on one specific caregiving fatigue. And so today we're going to focus on discouragement fatigue. And I'm going to share some insights about how we can heal when we are just absolutely discouraged. Okay, so here we go. Let's start. And I'm going to ask you some questions and feel free to share them in the chat room. And in addition, you're going to be asked to fill in some statements. And so if you want to grab paper and pen to be ready to write out some thoughts, feel free to do that as well. This is interactive, so if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat room, and I'd be happy to address them as we go through. So I'll monitor the chat room as we're going through today's presentation. So in today's world, there are so many reasons for us to be discouraged. When I first looked at discouragement fatigue, I really was specific to the caregiving experience, but so much has changed over the past couple of years that it feels like we have layers of discouragement and they all build on top of each other. So when we're caring for a family member, we are discouraged in terms of news we receive about our caree's diagnosis, options for treatment. In addition, we get discouraged around the lack of help. And certainly in today's environment, it's really tough to feel like there are options for help. And then we have disappearing family members. We hope that siblings or other members of the family will step up and help, and sometimes that just doesn't happen. In my family, we have an older sister who said in 2015, I'm out. I'm not going to help you anymore. And then recently, as some of you know, my brother died. So I thought of my family support as my 3 siblings, knowing that the 4th just wasn't involved. And now it feels even more difficult because one of my supports, my brother, died. And that can feel discouraging. Not only is there grief, but there's also discouragement. In addition, we are still in a pandemic. So the news we receive about the pandemic can feel very discouraging to us. We are still adjusting to the impact. And not only does it impact how we go about our day, but it also impacts the availability of help, for instance. And so if you follow the news around vaccine mandates within the healthcare system, you know that there is healthcare workers who are leaving because of vaccine mandates. So we had a shortage already, and now the shortage is getting even more significant. And then, so today is September 1st, we are watching climate change in real time. So there's fires in California, there's a hurricane in Louisiana, and we are just always braced for the next weather event. And in a caregiving experience in particular, the weather events impact your ability to be prepared. So for instance, if you're in California, you're thinking about evacuating and making sure that you have all the supplies so caregiving can continue even as you leave a home and go and stay somewhere temporarily. Before the hurricane hit in Louisiana, family caregivers would have been prepared for evacuating and ensuring they had the supplies to continue caregiving. Gosh, that's discouraging because you just feel like I can't get a break. Caregiving is tough enough, and now we're really focused on how do we endure all the changes in the climate. And then certainly there's really discouraging news from anywhere in the world. So no wonder we're discouraged, right? So the discouragement is in our house, in our communities, in our world. I'd love for you to share. So what's discouraging for you? So feel free to type in the chat room. What's discouraging for you today? So I gave you some suggestions of what could be discouraging, but please know that you can add anything that feels discouraging for you today. Too much work and too little time. Oh my gosh, that says so much right there, right? We have so much to do, but the day is limited because we cannot add more than 24 hours. Even if we stay up late and get up early, there's still only 24 hours. So much to do, so little time. And sometimes it feels like we are spending time on the work and we wonder, how did it get to this where I work and I have little time for anything outside of the work? Yeah, Sadie is sharing lack of me time and no help. Absolutely, that's so discouraging because what happens is you feel lost because there isn't time for you. And you wonder, where did I go? Where did I go in this? Yeah, and Christine is sharing money. That's huge. Watching, oh my gosh, her grandmother's money disappear. Yeah, trying to keep caregivers around the clock. So you've got the double whammy of spending money on care while trying to make sure there's enough care there. And it can feel like there's just not enough money. Plus, it might feel like there's not enough trained, qualified, reliable help. And then Deb shares trying to figure out what's going on with her mom. Oh my gosh, when she has weird intermittent states of fatigue. And the problem is we don't have x-ray machines to see inside our caree, to have an idea of what's going on. So we're guessing, right? It's so discouraging to be in a state of guessing because you feel like you can't find the right answer. And the guessing is around uncertainty. And then Lisa is sharing not having the flexibility to visit her mom and her siblings. That's hard. That's a loss right there. Okay. And yes, I also think what's interesting is if you're having connection issues, go ahead and stop your video because that can help with your audio. So it's probably something on your end that's creating some connection issues with your internet. So go ahead and stop your video and that will help your audio. Okay, and I also think we're just having a hard time in the relationships of our life. And that's what you guys have been sharing in the chat room. So thinking about what you shared, it can feel like you hit brick walls. No matter what you try, you hit a brick wall. There's not the right solution. You might have some empty promises from other family members. I'll step up and help. I'm available next weekend. And then the weekend comes and all of a sudden they're not there. They're just a no-show. And it's really difficult when you are watching a family member decline. And it's such an odd experience to see someone almost shrinking in front of you. I look at my dad and it just feels like he's almost like a shadow of who he was. And I look at my mom as she sits in her chair to eat and I think, what happened? What happened? And some of you were talking about all the work we have to do. It's the grind, right? You're just in that hamster wheel and it feels like every day you get up to this grind and it just wears you out. And then you might be feeling like I'm doing the best I can. I'm fighting the battles to get the best caregivers, to find the best help, to get the best treatment, to find the right support. And it just feels like you cannot win. There's all these smaller fights that lead you to believe that the battle cannot be won. And that's very discouraging. And then some of you were talking about relationships which bring you pain. And I think it's interesting right now that we have different types of relationships, meaning that we have relationships with people in our life, but we also have relationships with strangers, and that can be frustrating. Okay, so no wonder we're discouraged, right? I mean, it makes sense that we would feel like, oh, this is such a discouraging time in my life. And I think it's important for us to really zero in on what does it feel like. So I'd love for you to share. When you are discouraged, how does it feel to you? And think about it in terms of how does your body feel? How does your mind feel? How does your spirit feel? Sadie is talking about the trust issues, and that's so interesting. So she had a caregiver coming in who had COVID, and it sounds like the caregiver was not upfront about the fact that he or she had COVID, and it's hard to trust. And honest to goodness, Sadie, we were talking about this during another training session I had last week. It does feel like it's hard to know who to trust, what to trust, when to trust. And if you lose trust, it's hard to go into your day already knowing that you have to second guess, you have to ask for even more information, and you have to really do much more due diligence than ever. That's exhausting. So how does discouragement feel? Yeah, so thought in the chat room as you feel weak. You feel like giving up. Oops, I'm sorry. Forgive me here. Feel like giving up. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons that discouragement is so difficult. We're going to talk about that feeling of giving up. And also as Sarah's talking about, it's depleted of energy, physically, emotionally, you are unmotivated. And I think of two words that come to mind around discouragement, which is why bother? That's a hard way to live, right? Getting up every day and thinking, why bother? Whatever I do doesn't make a difference. Oh gosh, and Christine is sharing, brain feels like it is going to explode. Boy, if that is not a great visual of it, right? You're just like, ah, you know, and I think sometimes discouragement becomes anger and it feels like you're going to explode from anger. But I also think you're going to explode from tears, right? Because you're so discouraged. It feels like there's just this ocean of tears behind your eyes that are just going to explode. Oh, it's hard. It's hard to live in a state of discouragement. Okay, so let's get a little more specific for you. The reason that we talk about what it feels like for you is so that you have an awareness of this is what's happening. You're going to name it. And sometimes naming it helps. So when you share, either in the chat room or just privately, fill in the blank to these statements. So when you feel discouraged, think about my work is, and then overwhelming, frustrating, whatever it is, that the word that comes to mind when you describe your work when you feel discouraged. Yes, Barbara sharing, my work is exhausting. Yes. So when you feel discouraged, fill in the blank. My personal caregiving experience is, and for me, I would say draining. When I'm discouraged, it feels draining. And then fill in the blank around the discouragement in the pandemic. So when you feel discouraged, the pandemic is, so what comes up for me is a waste of time, which sounds so crazy, but I feel like we are just repeating all of the errors and all the mistakes over and over. We're not making any progress. It's so frustrating. I feel like, oh my gosh, we have solutions that we could use, and I wish everybody would use them, and then it would be easier. So Lisa is sharing no end in sight to work, right? And someone else is sharing unending and keeps going, right? It feels like there's no end, and it's so hard to keep going when you don't see that horizon, when you don't see the end of the road, when you don't see better, right? It's almost like you're feeling like you're always at 4 a.m., where you keep waiting for the sun to come up, but you're stuck at 4 a.m. When you think about the climate, what is the statement that comes to mind? So when I'm discouraged, the climate feels just heartbreaking. It feels heartbreaking to me what we've done to our world. And then thinking about the world feels scary. The world is scary. So Sarah is sharing the climate is evidence of the despair and the futility. Yeah. I also think we can also think about a lack of respect for the environment. So the climate troubles feel like the direct result of our disrespect. Okay. So keep in mind how you finished those statements. We're going to reframe them toward the end of today's presentation. So let's talk about why we want to be focused in on our discouragement, because it is detrimental to our good health. Just think about that visual that I apologize. I can't remember who it was that shared in the chat room that it feels like your head is going to explode. No wonder it is detrimental to our good health. It drains us, right? If we are discouraged, as you guys have been talking about in the chat room, it can feel difficult to get out of bed in the morning because you just think, why bother? And it steals our time. I really believe when we're in a state of discouragement, we feel the heaviness of our day. And it's hard to come up with the energy to move productively through our day. So the day feels just insurmountable. It feels like we are climbing a mountain and it's taking so long to climb it. So you probably remember days where you felt like, I can do this. This feels just all possible, and how you moved through your day in a way that felt like it was so easy. When we're discouraged, it feels so hard. And if it feels hard, it's taking too long and it steals our time. I think it was Sadie who talked about trust. And I think discouragement feeds our doubt. And the doubt can be of ourself, of our support system, of our community, of our family, of our world. So if you've had a situation where someone in the family said, I'm going to come on Saturday and help you, and you say, excellent, I'll be ready at 9 with donuts and a fresh cup of coffee. And then you are on Saturday alone with your donuts and your fresh cup of coffee. You doubt the goodness in the world. It's heartbreaking. And then if a professional who's COVID positive doesn't tell you that, you doubt every other professional. The doubt is difficult to live with. I'm just curious, feel free to share in the chat room. What's the doubt that your discouragement feeds? You know what else is the doubt? The doubt that I'm going to be okay and then I'm going to make it. That is another really difficult doubt. So if we have doubt, we don't have trust. Okay, oh my gosh, thank you for sharing this in the chat room. Someone is sharing, feels like you're no longer good at your job. You doubt your abilities. Oh my gosh, You know what's interesting? I had attended a workshop last spring, and it was around wellness in the workplace. And this terrific presenter shared an insight that I had never heard before, and I actually rolled it into our consultant training. And it's this idea that we have illegitimate tasks in our day. And it's unnecessary tasks or tasks that just feel stupid. Like you're just thinking, why do I have to go through this process? So within the healthcare system, there's a lot of illegitimate tasks, meaning you have to repeat your caree's diagnosis and history over and over and over and over. Now, I know there's a reason for it, but for us, it feels like, oh my gosh, why am I sharing the same story that I just told the other doctor to this new doctor in the emergency room? They both work in the emergency room. Why am I repeating this? So illegitimate tasks are very discouraging because it feels like they just waste our time. And it's interesting, illegitimate tasks can directly impact how we feel about our job. Oh my gosh, I'm just overloaded with all these tasks that don't make any sense. And yet I am required to do them. And Lisa is sharing, I doubt that family and friends really understand what is going on within our household, right? Yes. Yeah. So that doubt then can dispel your trust when you talk to someone about what's going on, that they really get it, which adds a disconnect in the relationship. So if trust is dispelled, there's a disconnect within our relationships. We can't trust that someone is safe to talk to, for instance, that we have a safe space to share honestly about what's happening in our lives and during our day. So I had alluded to this earlier, and I really think that discouragement also creates the dread about our future. Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be able to make it to tomorrow? How am I going to come up with the energy to get to next Tuesday? We dread our own ability to make it into our future. And I think ultimately, we've been talking about this, it really makes us feel like it's hard not to give up on today and tomorrow. And what's so interesting is that it is a trust that today will be okay and tomorrow will be okay. It's very discouraging. Natalie is sharing, it's frustrating that you have to repeat yourself so much. You want to tell people to work on their listening skills and to learn to follow directions. Oh my gosh, that is so true. That is so true. I also think that somehow people have lost the value for reading. So for instance, reading instructions, reading and directions, and taking ownership. I also think that I'm not sure what has happened, but I do think maybe people are just so tired that if they see a capable, competent person, they just immediately think, oh, I'm just going to have her take care of it for me, even when it's not yours to take care of. I just think it's kind of interesting that we do have to take care of so many people when we're competent and capable. Okay, so we have really figured out what's discouraging, right? And so now we're in this state of discouragement. We think, where do we go with this? How does this get any better? So I do think that we actually have the cure for discouragement. And it's to be encouraged. So let's talk about how can we feel encouraged during a time of discouragement? So here's what I think. We can find encouragement in the courage of our actions. I love the word encouragement because it includes the word courage. And our courage encourages us. And what's so interesting about that is it encourages others as well. I also think it helps us to release control of the outcomes. It's discouraging when we can't get to the outcome we want. However, it feels better if we focus on our efforts, our actions, what we can do and say and decide, and then release controlling that outcome. For those of you who are in a personal caregiving experience, you'll know how hard it is to let go. Because it feels like if you let go, chaos reigns. It is tough to let go of a particular outcome. But oftentimes the outcome is out of our control. What's within our control is how do we communicate? How do we request? What do we do ourselves? How do we make the most of this moment? How do we decide? Who do we spend time with? How do we spend our time? That's within our control. So Natalie, I'm so enjoying your comments about how we have to constantly tell the healthcare system the same thing over and over. And right, you feel like you have the information, just read the chart. Just read the chart, read the chart. Gosh, we had a situation, I'll just take a little bit of a tangent. So we had a situation with my mom where she had an internal bleed in 2015, could not stop it with typical interventions. So they did surgery to remove a third of her stomach. We thought, oh, this is it. We've solved the problem. She almost died, but we've saved her. And then, of course, she started another bleed. So at the time she was in a hospital, they moved her out of ICU to a regular room, and then she started another bleed. So they moved her back to ICU. So she had been in the same hospital for a good 2 weeks. And when they moved her from the ICU back to a regular room back to the ICU, a doctor came in and said, pretty much, what brings you to the ICU today? And it was so irritating. I had to leave the room because I thought, I am going to jump out of my skin that you can't just read the chart. And the doctor did say to me, because she could see my frustration, in a very dismissive way, which didn't help, I need to ask your mom these questions because this is protocol. And I was like, you know what? My mom is dying. So I think you can put protocol on pause for just a moment and just say, okay, let's take care of you. You've had a terrible 2 weeks. Let's take care of you. Okay. Okay, so then Natalie is moving us back into how can we feel encouraged? And that is go to the beach and get some vitamin C, SEA. I love that. Even for just 30 minutes. We've started a respite in place plan, and you are welcome to join any month that we do this. So it's another one of our monthly regular events. It's on the second Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. No CEUs, but it's just a helpful exercise to think about where can you get a break right where you are. And Natalie, what's so interesting is I use our community pool as a place to get a break. And it's that vitamin C that I enjoy as well. It's just nice to be outside. Okay, so back to feeling encouraged. We also can be encouraged by the gifts we bring to the world. Our gifts make the world better. Mary, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah. Our respite in place was fun. Yeah, so feel free to join on the second Tuesday of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Our Eventbrite page has the RSVP for that. So think about this. Every attempt you make is about courage, regardless of the outcome. So we've been talking about how discouraging it is to try, but we've lost sight of these attempts are really courageous. It's amazing what you do every day and the courage that you call up every day. That is amazing. And then think about the resilience you bring to your day every day. Regardless of the progress, you still bring into it, I'm going to do my best right now in this moment. And all of you have been sharing your gift of compassion, regardless of your experience. Courage, resilience, compassion, all of you have that. No matter how discouraged you are, you never lose courage, resilience, and compassion. I think that's interesting to think about. It stays in you because it is you. You are that. You are courageous, resilient, and compassionate. So let's get a little more specific as to what your gifts are. So feel free to just write on your paper and pen or share in the chat room. What are your natural, effortless activities? So a couple examples. You can draw and garden and organize. You can cook, listen well, and write. We have to pour some positive into our day. I totally agree with you, Natalie. Oh, Mary is sharing sleeping. I'll tell you what, sometimes I wish I were better at sleeping. If you can sleep, that is awesome. So think about what comes easy for you, and others say to you, oh my gosh, I don't know how you can do that. And it doesn't have to be that you have art in a museum. It could be that you can walk for 30 minutes around your neighborhood. Yeah, so Sarah is sharing some great examples, singing and prayer and gratitude. Those are great gifts. Lisa is sharing prayer and gardening and scrapbooking. Lisa, it's great that you talked about gardening because we talked about that in our Respite in Place class. Exercising, reading, and cooking is another insight from the chat room. Yeah, right? These are great activities that are your gifts. So let's think about how that looks. So these are activities, but they're actually your talents. So if we were to take those two examples that I just shared, you can draw, garden, and organize. You can cook, listen well, and write. We can turn it into what your gifts are, because those movements, those activities are an expression of your gifts. So you are creative, nurturing, and resourceful. You are daring, empathetic, and intuitive. So I'd love for you to think about who you are. So think about the 3 words that describe who you are. Feel free to write them on a piece of paper or share them in the chat room. And again, you're going to fill in this blank, I am, and then add 3 adjectives, 3 descriptors of who you are based on your insights about what you do that's so easy for you. Okay. So Sadie is sharing that she is organized. I'm going to add a word for you. Sadie, you don't have to take this word. Faithful and an effective communicator. So I am organized, faithful, and a good communicator. Other examples could be, I am funny, I am helpful, and I am committed. One of our certified caregiving consultants, Rachel Hiles, she talks about that she is a do-gooder, and I love that term. I am expressive, I am gracious, and I am a risk taker. So Lisa is sharing, I am creative, committed, and sensitive. And I love that word sensitive because oftentimes it gets a bad rap. But if you are a sensitive person, it means that you feel deeply for yourself and for others. And when you feel that deeply, you are committed to helping and supporting and caring and being compassionate. You could also say, I am kind, gracious, and artistic. And Natalie is sharing, I am loyal, assertive, and kind-hearted. Oh my gosh, I love that. And I want to mention too, that if you aspire to be something, you can actually be that in your descriptors. So I have been watching the author who wrote Atomic Habits, James, I know his last name, but it's escaping me right now. And he talks about be who you want to be, meaning in this particular statement, if you want to be a writer, say, I'm a writer, and then spend moments every day writing. If you want to be an actor, be an actor. I am an actor, and then spend moments in the craft of acting every day. If you want to produce content, you are a content producer, and then spend time producing content every day. Okay, Natalie, I love this. So Natalie is sharing that she wants to be more patient and a better leader. So you could say, I am assertive, patient, and a leader. Doesn't that sound great? So you can say what you want to be, because once you say who you are that person. No one else has to describe you in that way. You get to decide who you are. So you could also say, I am a problem solver, I am an activist, and I'm an advocate. And again, if you think, well, I'm not really that, once you say you are, be that person. Think about the solutions you want to solve. Think about how you want to be active as someone who promotes solutions. Think about how you want to be an advocate of solutions. Okay, so you get to be who you want to be. And this statement moves you into being that. Okay, so remember earlier when we were discouraged, we were describing all the reasons why we are discouraged. So now we're going to actually rewrite those statements. And you're going to say the truth about the situation. So my work is overwhelming. And then you're going to add the positive attribute that you bring to that situation. So it could be, although my work is overwhelming, I am leading my team to find a better way. And you're going to complete these 5 statements, and feel free to share them in the chat room. So the second one is, when my personal caregiving experience is draining, I am taking a break. I am going to get some vitamin C. Although the pandemic is trying, I am committed to doing all I can by getting vaccinated and wearing my mask. The climate is scary, and I am recycling every day. While the world is worrying, I am taking care of the people in my world. Okay, so Mary is sharing in the chat room. Oh my gosh. Okay, Mary, this is great. Although my work stinks, I am still helping people. I love that. I love that. What I like about these statements is that it reflects the reality. We're not pretending that everything is peachy keen. We are saying, this is my reality. This is the environment I'm in right now. And I am bringing my best to that difficult, overwhelming, trying, stinky environment. Okay, so continue to, oh my gosh. Okay, so Natalie is sharing another one, and continue to share in the chat room. Thank you guys so much. These are so helpful. So Natalie is saying, my work is never done. I am taking time out for myself. Right. So although my work is never done, I am taking time out for myself. Oh, I love that. I love that. And in particular, what I feel like this does for us is acknowledge that we have a positive impact. And it's what we often overlook. So, for instance, statement number 5 could sound like, while the world seems to be unkind, I am kind. And then it directs our behavior. So for instance, sometimes when I go into the grocery store and I see people wearing their masks wrong, it really makes me crazy. I really have to work with my response to it. So I just think, okay, but my mask is on right. I'm wearing my mask properly. Just takes my mind off trying to control someone else and then thinking, okay, but I'm in control myself. I'm going to make sure I'm in a good place. So Lisa is sharing, though my work has no end in sight, I'm finding the strength to get through it one day at a time and will keep walking toward the dawn of a new day, right? It may feel like 4 a.m., but you know what? You're going to get to 4:01 a.m. You're going to get to 4:02 a.m., right? You're going to get to the sunrise. You're going to keep walking. I love that. Yeah. So Natalie is sharing, when my personal caregiving experience is overwhelming, I am in control and choose my thoughts. Yeah. I love that reminder that we can choose our thoughts, because we often feel like the default is the world is blowing up, or this is terrible. This is the worst day ever. This is the worst situation that's ever happened. So I remind myself, well, I can choose my perspective about this situation. So that prompts me to think, okay, well, this is tough and I'm managing it. So here's the bottom line. When the outside world disappoints, go inside. Because you don't have to disappoint yourself, in other words. You have the courage, the resilience, and the compassion. So outside of you may feel like chaos, absolute chaos. But inside, you can be caring and kind and gracious, grateful, appreciative, effectively communicating. Okay, so Natalie is sharing another one for number 3. Okay. Although the pandemic is completely debilitating, I am not going to let the Karens of the world affect my positive outlook. Okay, Natalie, I'm going to share. I'm going to take that. I'm going to borrow that for myself, right? Because it's the Karens in the grocery store that make me crazy. But I'm going to remember not to let that Karen take away my positive attitude. Thank you for that, Natalie. Okay, because when the outside world disappoints, we're going to go in. We're going to connect to our own gifts. It's the gifts that we give the world. We can change our own world through our gifts, and we're tapping into the knowledge, the knowing, the believing in our gifts, and that we received these gifts so that we could do good with them. And the gifts were given to us. It's almost like individually, we each have our own specific gifts to do the good in the world. It's really kind of amazing. Think about collectively, when we all bring our gifts to one space, what can happen? Okay. The other thing I would love for you to take note of is, when you are the architect of positive change, make note of it. Rather than dismiss it, acknowledge it. You don't have to say it to everybody. You don't have to go around with a sign that said, I did great today. However, it's important that you take note that something you said, or something you did, or something you believe made a difference. because you want to keep doing that. The more you take note of it, the more you have it as a solution. In addition, when you take note, give thanks for it. Thank you for the ability to make a difference. Thank you for the opportunity to advocate effectively. Thank you for the opportunity to change a mindset. So a family that I know in my suburb, and I used to help take care of her daughters, sent me a text the other day because she said, guess who's in kindergarten? And it was this little girl that I used to take care of. And I said, how's it going? And she said, oh, it was pretty much of a nightmare the first day. We moved her to a different school. But instead of just making a decision that was right for her family, she also wrote to the principal and the superintendent of the school district to say, here are my concerns, so that it impacts other students, so other families feel the power of her advocacy. Okay, there we go. How do you feel now? Putting you all on the spot to say that you feel encouraged. Okay, okay, good. I see some head nods, yes. So how will you keep this encouragement? I'd love for you to share in the chat room. How will you keep encouragement? So we can keep an encouragement journal. So, there's a gratitude journal. You could think about, I am going to write every day my answer to that statement, I am, and then you fill in the blank with your 3 characteristics, your 3 gifts, and you can write about how those gifts showed up each day. Okay, oh my gosh, this is awesome. And then you could use affirmations. So you guys are sharing affirmations in the chat room. That's another way to stay encouraged, right? So Natalie is sharing, I am beautiful, I am worthy, I am valuable, I am loved, I am important, I'm a great person, I am. And then she continues to say brave, energetic, etc. Yeah, and I love this idea, Madeline, that we acknowledge the little moments, because it's those little moments that make the big difference. I had a family caregiver share an insight once with me years ago that I always remember. And it was actually his caree, his wife, who was a therapist, who would use this life philosophy, and that is arrive everywhere loved. I thought that was such a beautiful way of thinking about arriving into our day, arriving into our relationships, arriving into the grocery store, right? That will help me when I go into the grocery store. Arrive everywhere loved. Oftentimes it seems like we're chasing the love, and your affirmation, Natalie, of I am loved reminded me of that. Arrive everywhere loved. You don't have to chase the love. You are loved. You don't have to fight for the love. You don't have to prove that you are lovable. You don't have to work for the love, right? Sometimes we feel like we're just always working to be loved. You already are there. So arrive there with it. Okay, I'm glad that you guys are going to start to use these tips that we talked about today in your daily life. That's the goal, is to feel like there's practical ideas that you can implement in your day that doesn't cost money, that doesn't take a lot of time, and that aren't difficult to learn. It's just a little bit of a perspective shift. Okay, so let me share in the chat room links for you. Okay, so I shared 5 links. The first link is, if you want a CEU, click that first link that says CEUs. That will take you to the payment page. It's $15. You submit your payment, and then you're directed to the evaluation. You have 3 business days to complete the evaluation, and then we send email your certificate in about 10 days. If you are here but don't need CEUs, I'd also love for you to fill out an evaluation. And there's a second link to just what that evaluation is if you don't need CEUs. And then If you want to continue to connect with me, you can schedule 2 free sessions with me where you tell me a story and we do an overview of where you are right now in your life. And if you click the link, buy 2 free sessions, you can schedule 2 free 30-minute sessions with me. And then our next webinar as part of this series is December. That is completely wrong. It's October 6th. It's October 6th, and you can RSVP, and there's a link to that. And finally, we have a free resource, which is a free daily healing plan. You are welcome to download that, and there's that link to that as well. Okay, thank you all so much for being here. This was wonderful. It's great to connect with you. I am so encouraged by you, so thank you for all that you brought to today's workshop. And I look forward to seeing you at a future event or one-on-one when you schedule 2 free sessions with me. So thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of today. Have a good long weekend. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.